Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker, who is Joyce Hylton. I think it will be obvious as the presentation goes on that she's a very experienced teacher for many years in the public school system, but also luckily for us, she's one of the most talented and experienced public education presenters, and she's really our lawn care guru. I think most of us in the Master Gardener program have all been trained by Joyce on good lawn care principles. She also specializes in instructing on composting and weed identification and management. She's a leader in the Cooperative Extension Master Gardener Help Desk, and we are lucky to have her as part of our public education team. I know you'll enjoy and learn a lot from today's presentation.
Well, thank you for the introduction. I want to go ahead and get started since we have a lot to cover. And I'll start with the name of the program. You signed up for fall lawn care, and that's exactly what we're doing. But it's really best management practices for all seasons, especially the fall. And of course, you've already mentioned that we are part of the Virginia Cooperative Extension. As Master Gardener volunteers, we've been around since 1985, doing our best to help the public use the best gardening practices. So let's get started. And we're looking at best management practices, but the goal really is, let's create an environmentally friendly lawn. Some of you who live locally may have noticed yesterday's Washington Post had an article about the number of people who are getting rid of their lawns. And that's fine. But for those of you who would like to have a lawn, or at least a little bit of a lawn, let's do it the right way. Now we're going to look at 6 different sections about taking care of your lawn, focusing on certain essential concepts. So let's move on to the very first one, understanding grasses and lawns. So first of all, lawns do have a value. They do reduce water runoff. They do stabilize the soil. They do sequester carbon, not as well as an oak tree, but they still do a job. They do moderate temperature. They do filter pollutants that move into the groundwater. But for some of us, they are aesthetically pleasing. They create a sense of space. And for any of you with children or grandchildren, it's a great place to play. I keep mentioning best management practice, and these are a series of concepts that should be addressed as you take care of your lawn. And the way you address them is going to affect the environment. We're going to look at valuing the soil. We're going to look at timing. We're going to look at everything, but let's go back to the grasses. And I don't know why a certain illustration is not showing, and that's okay too. All grasses are not alike. In our area, grasses will thicken using 3 different techniques. One is the grass grows or thickens using tillers. And that is the idea that it starts at the crown of the plant, which is at the very base, and I'm using my hands here, and one blade will come up and the next one will come up right beside it, and it thickens from the base. It's called tillering. And that's what a fescue does. Rye will also do the same thing. However, another way that grass will thicken will be using stolons or rhizomes. So those of you who have a zoysia lawn or maybe a Bermuda grass lawn, your lawn is going to thicken by putting out stolons, in the case of the zoysia, that move along the top of the ground. And anytime it touches the earth, it puts down roots and another shoot comes up. Others, like Bermuda grass, will put down rhizomes that move underneath the soil. And again, it approaches the top and another shoot will come up. So if you understand how your grass thickens, then you can understand how you maybe need to adjust the way you treat it. Here in Virginia, our grasses are divided into 2 categories, cool season and warm season. Cool season grasses are the fescues, ryegrass, and bluegrass. The warm season grasses for our area are zoysia and Bermuda grass. But if you live a little bit further south, you can add centipede, you can add St. Augustine. There's several other choices that are available for those who have a warmer climate. But for us, it's kind of interesting to understand a distinction visually. If you have a cool season grass, in the wintertime, it is sort of greenish. However, if you have a warm season grass, especially zoysia, in the wintertime will produce this really lovely kind of cream or tan colored lawn, which I think is lovely, but it isn't green. But that's one of the distinctions between the cool and the warm season grasses. Another distinction is the temperature. Cool season grasses grow best when the temperatures are at 60 to 75 degrees. So this would be the spring. This is April and moving into May and maybe early June, but it's also late September moving into October. This is when it goes crazy. It's going to grow. Cool season grasses do require irrigation about 1 inch a week. And I'm going to pause here to say a cool season grass that's well established can actually go longer without water. It goes several weeks. It won't look good, but it doesn't die immediately. Cool season grasses will grow in sun or shade, but not heavy shade. And finally, there are the 3 basic varieties: fescue, bluegrass, and rye. But warm season grasses grow best when the temperatures are high. So right now, zoysia lawns are just having a ball. They love 85 degrees, 95 degrees. Also, they are drought tolerant. And while they appreciate that 1 inch of rain per week if they get it, they can go much longer without that rainfall. However, they do best in full sun. Once they're in the shade, they really do not perform that well. And locally, zoysia is the most common, but Bermuda is also moving in. Now, Bermuda grass in our area often is referred to as wiregrass. It gets into your garden and it's a pain in the neck and it's difficult to remove. But most of our athletic fields have moved to a Bermuda grass because it really handles traffic very well. So we're beginning to see more and more Bermuda lawns, mostly athletic fields, but maybe some lawns taking advantage of some of the strengths of the Bermuda grass. We've looked at the types of grasses. Look at the importance of soil. And I'm looking at it from the point of view of what we can do to support the soil as it supports our grass. In the best management practices, I think I've seen that slide before, we need to test the soil every 3 to 4 years. We need to maintain the pH, etc. So let's look at these steps. Let's do a soil test. And this really is essential. I don't care whether you're running an athletic field or your lawn, you need to do a soil test periodically. We recommend every 3 to 4 years. We want to know the pH of the soil because if we know the pH of the soil, it's going to enable us to make certain that the roots of that grass are able to absorb the nutrients. The soil test will also talk about other nutrients, especially 2 other macronutrients. And it will make some recommendations. So let's look at 3 slides. These are 3 soil tests. This homeowner did a soil test in 1991. The pH is 5.8. That's lower than the ideal. So yes, grass is going to grow. It just doesn't get as thick. And so the soil test said that the person needed to add any turf type fertilizer, but they needed to add some lime. And they recommended how much. The reference number is at 1,000 square feet. Anything that we add to the lawn is always going to use the reference per 1,000 square feet. So get used to that, please. This one had to add 85 pounds of lime per 1,000 square feet, but could only put down 50 pounds at a time. Don't want to overdo it. Lime doesn't burn the lawn and it can be spread out over several months. So easy done. Great job. Here it is now, 9 years later, and look at the pH. Look at the pH, 7.3. Well, that's high now. Yes, the grass is still growing, but you know, it's really not that thick because this homeowner, not too smartly, decided that, gee, if I needed lime to begin with, I'll just add a little every year. That's the right way. It's not. So please, do not add lime until it's actually needed. And in fact, this homeowner did not have to add lime for another 8 years. All right, so that's not good. So let's see what happens in the next slide. So in 2004, pH is now 6.8, which is pretty good. No lime is needed. Still, fertilizer recommendation is a little different. Here it's asking for a ratio. And that ratio is 3 to 1 to 2 or 4 to 1 to 2. You're not going to find a bag of lime with that exact ratio, but it's giving you the idea. For example, if instead I had a 16 to 4 to 8, that would be the same ratio, and we can make it larger. In other words, come close. It doesn't have to be exactly what they say. But the problem here, and again, let me go over here, is for the first time, please look, there is low potassium, and that's unusual. Now, the probability is very high that the soil test was done after an excessively wet period, and the soil had not been able to stabilize. In general, in our area, both potassium and phosphorus are relatively stable in the soil. That last slide also showed some additional soil test information, paid a little bit extra. And one of the things the homeowner learned is that the organic material at 7.4 was considered very high. That's good. That's great. And soluble salts were low. The other thing the homeowner learned in general was that there was a sufficient amount of the micronutrients. This test does not need to be repeated again. So why is pH so important? It allows the grass to absorb the needed macro and micronutrients, but if the pH is off, you cannot access certain of these macronutrients or micronutrients. For example, look at this chart. The green bar is roughly the ideal location for grass. You can vary it slightly, but it gives you an idea. Remember when the homeowner was complaining of 5.3? Well, look, they were not getting enough of the phosphorus, but that was provided by the fertilizer. But they were all low in calcium, low in magnesium. All of those play a role. When it was up here at 7.3, well, suddenly it wasn't getting as much iron or manganese as it needed. But if I can have the sweet spot, then the grassroots have access to these existing nutrients. So your goal is to maintain a pH close to that value. So understanding that, let's get started. Of course, one of the first thing we need to do is, what do you do to your soil? It depends. If you have a relatively healthy lawn, do not bother to till or even core aerate. However, if it's been compacted, so they've been playing football, the kids have been playing football on the lawn all year, you maybe need to do some core aeration. You would only till if you were totally starting over. So let's look at the fertilizer. When you go out to buy a bag of fertilizer, there will be 3 numbers at the top, and they are referring to the percentage of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Now, we need nitrogen because that greens up the grass. But here's the danger. It moves quickly through the soil, and any that's not absorbed will pollute our streams and rivers. And in the past, that's been part of our problem. We want to be aware of just how much nitrogen is put down. We don't want to put down too much. Phosphorus helps the roots, but very little is needed because it's relatively stable in the soil. A farmer who's putting down new seeds will put down a fertilizer with phosphorus because those seeds need to develop roots. Your grass already has roots, so it does not need the phosphorus. And as of 2013, you are no longer able to buy basic lawn fertilizer with phosphorus unless the soil test justifies it. If you were putting down a brand new lawn, then new lawn fertilizer would have phosphorus in it. Otherwise, please don't buy a fertilizer that has phosphorus. And potassium influences the overall health of a plant, but again, you don't need a huge amount because it's relatively stable in the soil. Now, we're getting ready to go out and buy that bag of fertilizer. So we've got to know a little bit more about how it works. Those three numbers refer to the percentage of each macronutrient in the bag. So if the label says 2804, those are the percentages of these active ingredients. They make up only 32% of that whole bag. So that means that the remaining 68% is nothing but filler. But that filler is the transportation for the macronutrients. Keep that in mind. We're dealing with percentages, right? Another thing, we want, wherever possible, and it does cost more money, you want to use a fertilizer that has information about what's called water-insoluble nitrogen or slowly available nitrogen. Both acronyms are used. They mean exactly the same thing. But the idea is that by using this slowly available nitrogen, it allows the greening process to take longer and slower. You're less likely to lose nitrogen to the underground water system. There's less damage by using this type of fertilizer. But from personal experience, it's not that easy to come by. You're going to have to do some looking and reading. So here's a bag of fertilizer. It's an old one, by the way, and you'll notice I X'd out that middle number because today we cannot buy that fertilizer with phosphorus listed. It should say 0 ideally, but here is one that says it has a high percentage of wind. Well, yeah, so what's a high percentage? Well, ideally, if you can find something better than 50% of wind, that's perfect. Now, if you look down at the very bottom of the bag, we know that 28% of this bag is nitrogen. But let's read carefully. Of that 28%, 15.4% is water insoluble. This is good. 11.8 is urea nitrogen, and the 0.8% is ammoniacal nitrogen. So really quick math, if I wanted a bag of fertilizer that had at least 50% wind, I'm looking for something that's greater, that's at 14%, half of that or higher. So this bag really does have a lot of water insoluble nitrogen. So when you're out looking, try to find information about either slowly available or water insoluble nitrogen. By the way, what about organic fertilizers? Most of the fertilizers you buy in the grocery store tend to be synthetic. They're essentially derived from urea and petroleum. Organic fertilizers are derived from plant and animal parts or their residue, but it's good. Now, organic fertilizers are naturally slow release fertilizers. So they're good in that regard. And organic fertilizers preserve the biotic quality of the soil. They encourage earthworm populations and normal microbial activity. Now, of the certain synthetic fertilizers, while we may be concerned about the earthworms, please understand that only one synthetic fertilizer, if you have one that's mostly ammonium nitrate, that will affect the earthworms, but the others do not. All right, here is a chart of commercially available organic fertilizers. If you choose to use any of these, some of them, to get the volume you might need for your lawn, you may have to go to a farm store, Tractor Supply, Southern States Cooperative, and a few others. But you could use these on the lawn, but with some exceptions. Our concern about phosphorus would make some of these undesirable, like seabird guano, we don't want. Also, you couldn't afford it, I don't think, for the volume that we might need, but it's much too high. We would prefer to have 0. Feather meal would be great. You just have to find a place to buy it in volume. So let me look at 5 of the organic fertilizers, the pros and cons. So feather meal would be great. 12% of nitrogen. You would only need 8 pounds per 1,000 square feet. That's doable. And there's no phosphorus. Blood meal is good too, but it does have 1% phosphorus. So if we're going to use blood meal and you're putting down fertilizer 2 or 3 times a year, you wouldn't want to use it more than maybe once. don't get in the habit of adding additional phosphorus unless necessary. Now, mill organite is another one. This is relatively cheap and easily available. It is good, but it's 2% phosphorus. So again, no problem using it. You just probably don't want to use it for more than one application a year. A lot of you have heard about corn gluten, and it really is a great fertilizer, but the problem is it is also a pre-emergent herbicide. So if you put down grass seed and then fertilized it with corn gluten, guess what? You don't get any grass. Now, personally, this year, I have chosen not to overseed in my lawn. And this year, I'm fertilizing just with corn gluten. I'm hoping maybe to control a few weeds in the process. I've got my fingers crossed. But I'm not going to put down any seeds because I know they won't germinate. A little footnote on this, it's even hard to find large bags of corn gluten, but they do exist. And the last organic fertilizer I listed, more for entertainment value, is composted cow manure. At 0.5 of a pound per 1,000 square feet, you would have to put down 200 pounds of this to meet the minimum nitrogen requirement. Can you imagine how deep that might be over 1,000 square feet? Worth a laugh. All right, we need to use it correctly. So using it correctly means putting down the right amount and at the right time. And the next slides are going to talk about a program designed by Virginia Tech. We're going to look at 4 slides that show programs 1, 2, and 3, and then a combination. And I'll explain them as we go through it. If you need to find the printed reference, you can go to Lawn Fertilization in Virginia. First chart, program number 1, and here's the difference. Program number 1 is using the cheapest fertilizer you can find. The likelihood of any of it being water-insoluble nitrogen is low, not much of it. And so what they're telling you to do, if you're using cool season grasses, this one is a cool season grass, you can only put down 0.7 of a pound per 1,000 square feet, but you do it in September. You put down another application, again, 0.7 of a pound per 1,000 square feet, but you do it in October. The green area refers to an optional thing. So you can put down another 0.5 of a pound per 1,000 square feet in November, and possibly again, no later than May 15th. Be careful when you fertilize in the late spring because that generates growth that may have problems. Now, if instead you're trying to grow a shade grass, which is a fine fescue, notice you only put down 0.7 of a pound once. Shade grass does not need much fertilizer. It doesn't want it, so it's wasted. You put it down, it doesn't take it up, it goes into the water table. Over here, Bermuda grass, notice that you can put down material in September and October, but it's a warm season grass. The best time to feed that warm season grass is going to be May, June, July, and August. In other words, when it's actively growing, that's when you fertilize a warm season grass. In our area, zoysia grass is the one. We cannot grow centipede this far north. But again, look at zoysia, fertilize in May. And if you want to fertilize again in July, but always at low rates because you're using a cheap fertilizer. So let's look at the next chart. Now I'm spending a little bit more money for my fertilizer. Now, interestingly, I can put down a little bit more, 0.9 of a pound per 1,000 square feet. Over here, 1 pound per 1,000 square feet. But I've got a slow release. It's going to spread out. It's going to last a little bit longer. But again, I do it in September and October, optional in November for my cool season grass. Notice that actively growing June, July, nothing. Never fertilize a cool season grass after about the middle of May. However, if you happen to have a warm season grass like Bermuda, fertilize May, June, July. Notice the timing is important. And finally, zoysia grass, again, 1 pound, best time is May. You can do it again in usually late July, early August. By the way, in each of these, there's a total figure. If you're really looking to help the environment. What you want to do is keep a record of how much fertilizer you put down in the course of a year. And you do not want to exceed, I'll go over here at my cool season grass, 2 to 3.5 pounds total per 1,000 square feet in a year's time. By the way, if you only put down 2 pounds per 1,000 square feet for that year, the difference is you just don't mow it quite as often. And I'm serious about this. The more fertilizer you put down, a little bit more maintenance is required. So please notice each of these are totals. You don't want to exceed that total in a year's time, because if you do, you're basically putting nitrogen into the underground water system. Now, here's where we get the really good stuff. You're paying big bucks for this. But if you've got really good quality fertilizer, notice now I can do my cool season grasses anywhere from 1 to 1.5 pounds per 1,000 square feet in September and October, and I do nothing else. And I try to keep my total at the most at 3. Go over here to zoysia, it's staying the same. So, by the way, I'll go back to my fine leaf fescue. This is a shade grass totally, and it simply needs little fertilizer. And preferably in September is the best time. So keep that in mind. So here's a combination chart, maybe so you can see them all. And I've broken it down to cool season versus warm season grasses. This is cheap, moderately priced, and expensive. And look at the amount you put down and the time, September and October. You know, when do you put it down? How much do you put it down? But the totals become important. And so once you know what type lawn you have and you know what type fertilizer you have, you go back to this chart and you select how many pounds per 1,000 square feet you need to put down. I've just kind of mentioned it, but if you put down too much nitrogen in the spring, it simply cannot be used by the plant. And when it is used, it ends up putting out growth when it least can support the growth. So you really don't want to put down too much nitrogen in the spring. For those who say, but what about starting a lawn in the spring? Yes, you can. Lawns started in March, and that's really the best time, will never be as vigorous as those started in the fall. If they make it through the summer, then they're going to be fine. But it's a difficult time to start particularly a cool season lawn. Basically, keep in mind that you don't want to over-fertilize in the spring. Now, some of you really just want a dark green lawn. There's a kind of easy way to do it without using fertilizer. Actually, you use a micronutrient, but if you use a foliar spray of chelated iron, you can spray several times. Cool season turf is the best, and it will look darker green. All right. But you haven't made it put out any more growth, probably have given it a little more strength. You can also do it on warm season grasses, especially centipede. In our area, it's mostly zoysia. And 3 to 4 applications are fine. Follow the information on the container for a dark green lawn. Now it's time to make a decision what we're going to do. And this really is so important. Please measure your lawn. Very important. And you want to exclude any area like decks, the house, the driveway. You want to focus on just the lawn, and you want to measure it and then divide it into geometric shapes such that you're able to easily determine the whole area. So we have a triangle, we have a rectangle, we have another triangle, we have lots of rectangles. We would measure those. Remember your basic, I believe the area of a rectangle is the length times the width. The area of a triangle, I think, is 1/2 the base times the height. But you figure out the area that you're going to be fertilizing. Please keep your diagram someplace that you don't lose it. Keep your total available, because that information is going to tell you what you want to do next. So how much fertilizer do you need? We've got to work with a ratio. I keep talking about that. Pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. So we go back now again to the percentage of nitrogen in the fertilizer. And then we're going to have a simple formula that tells you how much you actually need to put down on your yard. Don't just look at the bag and says, oh, it says it covers 5,000 care feet. I've got about 5,000 square feet. I won't measure. Please, if you care about the environment, try to do it the right way. So let's look at the formula that we're going to create. Remember, it's all based, first of all, on the percentage of nitrogen in the bag and the amount of pounds per 1,000 square feet that the earlier chart told you you needed based on your fertilizer and the type grass. So if I need to put down fertilizer at 1 pound per 1,000 square feet, okay, or 7/10 of a pound, or even ½ pound, what do I do? Well, the percentage of nitrogen on the bag is where you start. Let's assume that we have a bag with 29. The first formula is based on 1 pound per 1,000 square feet. So look what I do. I multiply that number by 100. And by the way, the only reason you're using 100 is to get rid of a decimal place. That's the only reason. All right. So I take that number, 1 pound per 1,000 square feet, 1 pound of nitrogen, but I divide it by 29. That's what's on the bag. That tells me I need 3.44 pounds out of that bag to cover 1,000 square feet at the rate of 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. But if instead the chart told me I can only put down 7/10 of a pound per 1,000 square feet, the formula doesn't really change. I still divide by 29. I still multiply by 100. But now I only need to use 2.4 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Now that's just 4,000 square feet. So what if you happen to have a lawn that's 5,750 square feet? First of all, divide that by 1,000. Remember, 1,000 is our reference point. So it's a unit. So I need basically 575 units, if you wish, or 13.8 pounds of nitrogen from that bag. And you really want to get in the habit of measuring. I'll talk about that in just a minute. If you have a tiny lawn, if you only have 820 square feet, you again divide by 1,000, but now you only need ultimately 1.96 pounds. So what do? You really need to measure it. Use a simple kitchen scale. This is my scale. I use it there. I have this cup, and that cup has been measured. So I measure it, determining how much is in that cup. I mark it. And now I know, in my case, it's only 8 ounces in that cup. So it takes several dips before I can get, 10 pounds of fertilizer to put on my lawn. But once you have that reference, always for this same fertilizer, by the way, measure it. So I'm not going to put down too much nitrogen. I'm simply not. And if anything, maybe I'll fall short. I also choose to use a drop spreader because I have a small lawn. But if you've got a large lawn, it would make a lot of sense to use a rotary spreader. Regardless, try to make multiple passes. The bags and also the spreaders themselves will give you information about how to spread the fertilizer so that you don't end up with empty spaces. Okay, but if you're a little confused about calculators, you can go online and get a fertilizer calculator. Some of them I questioned. In fact, some of them didn't give me good answers, but the one at Missouri did a good job. Any questions on the fertilizer?
Yes, Joyce, I'm not sure I understand the question, but someone asked how you can tell a cheap fertilizer versus the most expensive in terms of the application you described. I think they might be asking how you tell the percentage of water available, but anyway, could you try and address that?
Okay, I did make references to cheap, moderately expensive, and expensive, and all of that is based on the amount of water insoluble nitrogen in the bag.
Okay.
Sometimes, remember, they might call it slowly available nitrogen. Either acronym works, but learn to read the bag and you know what's there. So,
Okay.
From personal experience, the better fertilizer also obviously costs more.
All right, thank you. But it saves you some labor, it looks like.
It can. Oh, it really can. And it's better. It really is better for the ground, but you do what you can do. So each person makes that choice. Just if you're using the cheap fertilizer, do not put down heavy amounts.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So let's now look at the underground story. You're making all this effort to fertilize the lawn, but you're thinking about the grass. Actually, it's the roots that you need to focus on. So let's look at what's going on. The first slide here, the red arrows indicate the carbohydrate. So when I feed my lawn, the energy level is absorbed, the carbohydrate rather is absorbed by the roots. The roots are the white line, and of course the shoots are the yellow line. Please notice the two red arrows in the fall. If we put down 2 applications of fertilizer in the fall, well, first of all, the grass is slowing down. It's just not growing. But look what really is happening. Suddenly, the carbohydrate level jumps. And look what the roots start doing. The roots start growing in the fall. So in the winter, when you think nothing's happening, those roots are getting stronger and they're growing. And so come spring, we see this sudden loss of carbohydrates. We see the roots stop growing, but suddenly the grass blades are growing. Now you can put down a fertilizer, optional fertilizer in the spring at a low rate. You have to look at the chart to determine what kind you can use, which gives a slight bump in the carbohydrates for the roots. But essentially, what you do in the fall is what helps the grass in the spring and the summer. So understand this is for the cool season grasses. Warm season grasses, and this would apply to zoysia and Bermuda, in fact, any of the warm season grasses. Notice that if you put down fertilizer in the winter or fall, it's wasted because the roots are not growing. The roots and the shoots start growing at about the same time if you look at this diagram. So you want to fertilize in May, roughly, and you can fertilize again in the end of July, roughly. But notice how that is the time when the warm season grass can take full advantage of the carbohydrates for the root growth. You're almost ready. You've done your soil test. You have measured your lawn. You have purchased the fertilizer. You have estimated the amount of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. You've measured it out. And now we're going to move on to seeds. The best time to seed or overseed a fescue or cool season lawn is late August, right now, late August to early September. Now, yes, you can do it again roughly mid-March, but the best time to do it is in the fall. Zoysia lawns are best improved in the summer months when it is actively growing. And here in our area, we cannot use seed for a zoysia lawn. To successfully do it, we need to use plugs or actually put in the sod. Regardless of whether you're using warm season or cool season grasses, it's always best to select the best seed possible. And it does cost money, but it's money well invested. In fact, there's some new seeds on the market, and they are endophyte enhanced grasses. These are grasses that are infected, if you wish, with a non-disease causing fungus. They discovered it quite by accident. It really is a natural process. And so they're now creating seeds that automatically have it. These seeds are, as the chart says here, comparatively vigorous, especially under conditions of minimal fertilization or irrigation. They produce more tillers, more roots. They are more drought tolerant, more competitive with weeds, and they're able to recover more rapidly from injury. They are really appreciated because they perform well under high temperature and nutrient and water deficiency. All of these are things that we want to look at. So if you have the chance to put down new seed in your lawn, you may want to look for those that are described as being endophyte enhanced grass. They have different names. They're numbered out on the product right now. And yes, they are the most expensive grass seed out there. But if you can get your lawn started with this type grass seed, you will benefit from it down the road. Mowing heights, this is a really big deal. Depending on the type grass you have, if it's predominantly fescue, you want to mow it high, and ideally at least 3 inches. At 3 inches, it makes it difficult for weed seeds to fall down through the cracks, so to speak, and reach the soil. It really does help control weeds. Bluegrass and zoysia are mowed much lower, but those plants either put out stolons or rhizomes, which mean they can crowd out weed seeds. Bermuda grass is also in that category. Fine or hard fescue is the shade fescue. You cut that very high, and remember, you don't fertilize it very much. Please take off no more than 1/3 of the blade at a time and keep the blade sharp. Probably that last is something we need to make a greater effort to do, because a dull blade will tear the grass seed. That torn edge of the grass is more susceptible to disease. So keep the blade sharp. And remember, mowing tall fescue at 3 or more inches is and that's supposed to be good weed control technique. Mow high. Irrigation basics. This is where a lot of people really do make mistakes. The ideal is 1 inch of water per week all at once. Keep in mind, a warm season grass could even go a little bit longer before they get that 1 inch, but you want it all at once. Next, you want to water early in the day, finishing before 10 a.m. The deal here is the grass has a chance to dry off before evening sets in. Sometimes you have no other choice but to water late in the day. If so, start by around 4, but end no later than 7 p.m. in the summer months. You're gambling here, because if it's really humid weather, which we've certainly been experiencing, and the temperatures are relatively warm at night, that's a perfect environment for disease to form. You're inviting a lot of fungal diseases to establish. So watering late in the day is chancy, but sometimes you have no choice. Keep in mind, when you water, you want it to be deep, not shallow. And that's a problem with some of the in-ground sprinkler systems. Yes, they will water every week and you're going to have good looking grass, but because it's been watered frequently and not for large amounts, the grass roots are not going to be that deep. Whereas if it's watered once a week or even once every week and a half at that 1 inch, the inch means the water moves down in the soil. And as the soil starts to dry out, those roots can still reach down a little bit longer and get to that moisture. So we've got longer and stronger roots by not watering every day or every other day. It's just not a good idea. So keep in mind, if you can, water early. 1 inch per week is the ideal. Be aware of what Mother Nature provides. So when Mother Nature gives you 2 inches of rain, you've got at least another week before you need to even think about putting down water. So please be aware that how you water has a real impact on how the grass grows. Now, some of you want a weed-free lawn, and as I say, in your dreams. But you can have a lawn with fewer weeds in it by understanding what you might be doing wrong. The following things all affect the ability of weeds to move into your lawn. If the pH is off, the grass is really not performing that well. If you have too much or too little needed amendments, or you put them down at the wrong time, that's a big one. The soil is compacted and you've not bothered to do anything about it. You mow too high or you mow too low. Again, not good depending on the type grass you have. And you've decided to spray some sort of either herbicide or fungicide on your lawn, but it's not the right kind. In other words, if you don't do it the right way, you're asking for trouble. The Virginia Cooperative Extension puts out a broadleaf weed control chart. And in it, it lists 5 chemical combinations. These are the most common ones found in any of the commercially available herbicides. But the chart will also tell you when it's the best time to treat. It'll give you the name of the weed. It'll tell you the classification. And then it will list how it responds to each of these chemical combinations. Please notice that bed straw, which by the way, is easily pulled. I'd use it only if I have a whole yard full of it, I guess. It responds well to a combination of 2,4-D and dicamba, but it only has an intermediate response to this combination. And this combination, it's resistant to intermediate. However, here, it's susceptible to this combination, intermediate to susceptible. So read the label on your herbicide. What is the active ingredient? And is it the right herbicide for the problem that you've identified? Notice it even tells you the best time to treat it. We have this chart listed in one of the references that are provided. Many of you want to use organic weed control, and hey, it's great. Please understand that the chemicals can kill pests just like synthetic pesticides and herbicides. Here's what a lot of people don't realize is that they share the same molecular structure as their synthetic counterparts. They may be labeled non-chemical alternatives, but they are not necessarily any safer. One more thing, most organic weed control products kill or injure grass, so you don't want to use them there. They are best used on seedling weeds. Well-established weeds do not respond well. I know a lot of people like to use horticultural vinegar, and it really does work on the seedling. However, on let's say we've got a healthy dandelion, it'll make the leaves shrivel up, but basically you've just insulted the dandelion. It's coming back. So choose your organic products carefully and keep in mind that it's really aimed more at seedling weeds rather than mature weeds.
May I jump in here with a few questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, these are kind of going back to the seeding and watering. Can you overseed with the new endophyte enhanced seed?
Yes, you can. Make sure you've scratched the surface of the dirt so that the seed actually touches the dirt. So that's real important, that you scoured the soil so that the seed can get to it. But yes, you can overseed with it.
And another seeding question, what should be done if part of the lawn is in sun and part is in shade?
Most fescues can handle both unless you're dealing with really deep shade. And if it's really deep shade, we don't recommend trying to grow grass at all.
Okay.
In fact, if it's, for example, around a tree, put in some mulch and let the tree live happily without competition from grass roots.
All right. Will shade fescue tolerate some afternoon sun in late summer?
Probably, but keep in mind, if you put in a real shade fescue, you're mowing it much higher than you are your other lawn.
And finally, someone asked, it seems ironic to always say to water in the morning because of disease, because it can rain day and night.
Well, we have no control over Mother Nature. I'm talking about when you have some control, that's what you should do. Mother Nature does what Mother Nature wants to do. And we just have to adapt.
Okay, that's good for the questions for now.
Okay, all right, I've got one more thing, and I personally am slightly excited about this next organic weed control product. Remember mentioning earlier that iron was a great, this chelated iron was a great way to darken your lawn, make it look dark green. Well, they now realize it's a great weed killer. Chelated iron is soluble, it can be sprayed, and broadleaf weeds take it up more easily than turf. Grass is a fine blade, so it just turns dark green. But the broadleaf take up maybe too much iron, if you wish. Essentially, it kills it. Products are available on the market right now, but they know that depending on the rate at which you administer it, it can kill even ground ivy, which is a pain in the neck. We're just finally getting it into the States. Canada has been using this for over a decade. And so we know it does work. Doesn't work perfectly, but it's organic, and it has the potential of killing weeds that some of our weed killers have trouble with. We don't know about it on zoysia, on some of the warm season grasses, so be careful on using there. Do read the label of the containers. But we do know, research has shown that depending on the applications, that it really does kill weeds. And the downside is if you're spraying it and you get too close to your sidewalk, well, you may have the iron stain on it. So do be kind of aware of that. But there are a number of products on the market that are iron-based organic herbicides, something to look at. Any questions on that?
Does
Okay.
foliar spray kill beneficial insects that live in the soil?
That's a good question, and I really
Yeah.
don't have an answer. I would look at the container, because environmental standards for most of these herbicides and pesticides have to address how they affect other things like bees and fish and so forth. So I would look at that. Now, I'm going to give a guess, and it's probably not, because iron is naturally occurring element in the soil. But I cannot say that with certainty.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and so we're almost at the end. Please understand that a reasonably healthy lawn can handle disease and infestations fairly easily. If it was healthy to begin with, it's going to hang in there. And I said earlier, if we hit a drought, if you've got a zoysia lawn, that zoysia lawn can handle the drought a lot better than a fescue lawn. At the same time, a fescue lawn, well established, if it was healthy to begin with, can last up between 6 to 8 weeks before it actually dies. So it may not look good, but it can handle it. Now, if you think you have a problem, you've got a disease or an insect, please have it properly identified before you go out and buy something to spray. I cannot tell you the number of people who have contacted our help desk over the years to complain that they have a fungus and they've been spraying all this stuff and it's not doing any good. Well, sorry, they had the wrong fungicide. You need to get one that's appropriate to the fungus on that particular lawn. And this is when you come to the extension office and you ask us to identify what's going on. And the last thing, sometimes doing nothing is a viable alternative. Come winter, a lot of that is taken care of. We have learned that if you follow the best management practices, really follow them, you will have an environmentally friendly lawn. It might look like this. So good luck. There are several references for you that are worth exploring. The first two from Virginia Tech give you really good step-by-step guidance. Toward the end, there's one on explanation of soil tests that is worth reading, but I think you'll enjoy reading about the iron-based herbicides and the endophyte enhanced grass. Good luck, and do let us know if we can do anything to help you.
Joyce, would you mind taking one more question?
I'd love to. What can I do for
Someone
you?
asked if you would review again what to do if your soil test shows a pH that's too high, like 7. How do you mitigate that?
You do nothing. It's a great question. And I have to confess that the person who did that was me. Those were my soil test notes. I'm the one who put down way too much nitrogen, idiot. But the grass was still growing. It just wasn't thickening. So I just needed to leave it alone. And I had to leave it alone for 12 years before I could put down more lime. Now, the grass got better each year because it was getting closer and closer to the proper pH. So when you make the mistake, just grin and bear it.
So you're saying really you have to live with that. There's nothing you can do to make it better.
They don't recommend it, but we do know that sulfur does drop the pH. And if it were really, really bad, I think that the soil test would even recommend using sulfur. But mine was not that far out of whack. I mean, 7.3 was pretty bad, but it was manageable. If I'd probably hit 7.8, they would have said use some sulfur. But I don't want to use anything unless I know how much to use.
All right, well, thank you very much. I think that covers it for the question. Oh, wait, late one. What about using gypsum?
Again, I stay away from adding anything unless it's truly recommended.
Okay. And if you have a large lawn, about how many square feet should you do a soil test?
That's a great question. And in fact, if you've got a large lawn, let's say you've got 5,000 square feet, which is pretty big, you want to do several different soil tests because the pH will vary from one area to another. So a good ballpoint, you do a soil test for the front lawn, a soil test for the lawn on the left, a soil test for the lawn on the right side, and a soil test for the one in the back. And if the back has a huge number of square feet, then you might want to do a couple of soil tests. But the key is when you do them, give some sort of technique for indicating where that soil test came from. So you'll write front, left side, right side, under the tree, by the fence, whatever, give yourself a clue. Because if you don't, when it comes back, you get all these different readings, but you don't remember where the soil test was taken. So please learn to give yourself some sort of label so you know where that soil test was taken.
What do you think is the biggest amount of lawn you could have on just one soil test?
Personally, I've gotten rid of all my lawn except in the front, and I do one soil test, and I've got about 1,200 square feet. So
okay, that's a good guideline. Thank you. That looks like it does cover it for the questions. Thank you so much. We learned so much and didn't realize that you were a math instructor as well.
oh dear.
This talk.
Well, believe it or not, calculating the fertilizer is not as difficult as it sounds. And I hope people will become accustomed to doing it and get in the habit of measuring your fertilizer. Don't guesstimate, please measure.
Okay. Thank you very much, Joyce. This was great.
All right, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.